welcome to Wapping, the world of Wapping, and thank you for inviting me. The event this afternoon was... Can everybody hear me at the back?
Yes.
Yeah. The event this afternoon follows on a very emotional event this week. On Thursday, in Tower Hamlets, not very far from where the Wapping Dispute took place 30 years ago, we had a reunion of over 120 Wapping veterans. Absolutely terrific occasion. Lots of people getting together and reminiscing and getting very angry again, and then getting very sad, and then getting very angry and very sad. And as you can imagine, it's quite a time for everybody. I wasn't one of the people sacked, although I worked at the Times in the 1970s. I was, by the time of the dispute, an elected full-time officer of the union, and 700 of my members were sacked by Murdoch, the clerical workers. So the range of people that were affected by the Murdoch conspiracy ranged from very highly skilled, highly paid craft workers right through to canteen workers and cleaners, with all jobs and ranges in between. The ones who weren't directly involved were the electricians, who were left completely high and dry by their own union, and were as much a victim of the Murdoch conspiracy as the rest of the workers. And the journalists were not involved. But some of the journalists were so appalled at the action of Murdoch in trying to make them go to Wapping, in contravention of what the print unions were trying to do at the time, that when they refused to go, they were sacked along with the rest of the workforce, and they became known as the refuseniks. There are about 80 of them. And as Paul has said, and Ivy and others, over 5,500 workers, nearly 6,000 workers were sacked, and they were sacked overnight, literally overnight. The strike was declared, and on Friday the 24th of January, at about 7 o'clock in the evening, maybe 6:30, quarter to 7 I think it was, the strike was declared. And as people started to leave, the company started handing out letters of dismissal. So it's really, you pay your money, you take your choice whether you think the strike actually started or whether, as Paul said, it was actually a lockout. And then a second letter of dismissal was issued on Monday, the 27th of January. I'm coming to a point here. And the conspiracy, we knew that something was going on, but nobody was clear what exactly it was, although we knew that many people did know what was happening inside Wapping. But people, it's very hard to believe that something as vile as what actually happened would be done by anybody. And I think that we see the product today, that anybody, any organisation that was prepared to conspire, to sack, to get rid of an entire workforce was capable of doing anything. And that's exactly how you can see that 30 years, well, 25 years later, the whole phone hacking scandal and the horrors of Millie Downer and so on emerge, and many other things as well. It's all been gone into, I don't need to repeat it. But Murdoch sacked everybody on the Friday, the Saturday, the Sunday, and the Monday, because that's when everybody's start time would begin, so the strike would start. So most people were actually sacked twice. On the Monday as well, Murdoch applied for an injunction to stop SOGAT and the NGA from instructing other workers to declare solidarity by refusing to handle the papers. And then there was a series of injunctions granted the whole of that week. SOGAT, NGA, Transport General Workers Union, Post Office Workers Union, and so on. And the result of that was that the trade union movement was threatened as a whole. SOGAT defied the injunction, hence the sequestration. In all of the court actions, the extent of the conspiracy was revealed because the court papers, revealed during the processing of the court action, showed that Murdoch had set up shadow companies in 1985, and so on and so forth. So the whole complexity was revealed in all of its gore, if you like. And on the 4th of February 1986, a week or so after the strike had started, the Morning Star published a letter. And the letter is on display now a copy of the letter is on display now at the Tower Hamlets exhibition in London, and it's also on our website. And the letter is from Farrers, the company's solicitors, also the solicitors of the Queen. And in the letter, it makes it absolutely clear that the best way of getting rid of a workforce is to make them go on strike. And if you're really clever, you can make sure that you sack everybody by timing the dismissals. Now, that letter was given to was leaked to a national newspaper who refused to publish it. So it found its way to the Morning Star, who of course would publish it, and did publish it. And it's absolutely crystal clear that it was unequivocally a conspiracy. The book by Linda Melvin that somebody else referred to earlier on, called The End of the Street, goes into absolute detail about it. On the website, you'll find a wonderful little publication which we reproduced in full, written by the Fleet Street some of the Fleet Street electricians, the ones who were left high and dry by their own union, which describes in detail some of the points that Mike Simons was making earlier on about how the leadership of the ETU, they were a pirate leadership, you can't even call them right-wing. They weren't, it's not the normal kind of political differences. They were a pirate leadership, a renegade leadership of their union. How they did it in conjunction with Murdoch. Now, I thought it was important to go into a little bit more detail because at the same time as all of this, while we're talking about it all, we have to set it in the context as well of press ownership, because Murdoch is in it for the money, there's no doubt about that. The Sun was the only newspaper that didn't have to rely on advertising to make money. It made bundles of money for Murdoch and enabled Murdoch to finance and worm his way via the purchasing of United States citizenship, and then to the purchasing of Fox News and 20th Century Press, 20th Century Fox, and so on, as you know. But it's also about power, manipulating governments in Australia, influencing, buying off politicians and public officials and journalists in the United Kingdom, and heavily financing, horrifically financing political organisations and subcommittees of the Republican Party in the United States. Quite chilling if you ever read about it. And an organisation called the Campaign for Press and Broadcasting Freedom was set up in the late 70s, early 80s, arising from a whole process of examining the role of the press and media, and questioning what sort of media, what sort of press we should have? What are the democratic implications of a press that's dominated by large companies and megalomaniac proprietors? There was also at the time a lot of effort put into demanding the right of reply in Fleet Street. A lot of people thought we were a bunch of horrors. We thought that we were doing the right thing. We thought that it was the right thing to fight for the best conditions, the shortest hours, the longest holidays, and the best pay. And we were proud of it. And that applied not just to journalists, highly paid journalists who spent most of their time in the pub. It also, that's what is said, so a little bit of overlap, but the context of this is that we had very highly paid production workers, and proud of it. We also had very lowly paid canteen workers and cleaners, and quite a few lowly paid clerical workers, and we were constantly trying to bridge that gap. But we also used our strength in support of other workers when we could. Deep pockets for the miners' disputes, deep pockets and presence on picket lines at Grundle, and so on. But we also took action, and the last time that Fleet Street workers went on strike en masse was not in support of themselves, but in support of the National Health Service workers in the early 1980s. We responded to the TUC call for a one-day strike. Amazing that they did it, but they did. That the TUC called it. And the point about that action was that occasionally, not often, not all the time, we were able to get people to take action in support of others. But we were also able to get them to take action where the filth produced in some of these papers was so bad that it had to be stopped. So sometimes there was a white space in the paper, like there's a very famous one, and I can never remember the date of it, London Evening Standard wanted to print a particularly racist cartoon by cartoonist Jack. And the union at the time was Slade, and they refused to print it, they refused to process it, so the paper appeared with a white space. That would happen. Or there would be no paper at all because the management would dig their heels in, they would refuse to take the article out, or they wouldn't give us the right to reply, or occasionally we would get the right to reply. So there were three possible outcomes. Murdoch hated it. He absolutely hated it, but so did all the other proprietors. We weren't always successful, but we used to give it a good go. We did it on the Grunwick dispute, and the Mein Führer debacle at the Sun. I'm sure that it is the case that Murdoch decided that that was it, enough was enough. Now, the Campaign for Press and Broadcasting Freedom was created in that kind of atmosphere of redefining the freedom of the press. It's a much misused expression, deliberately so. They're reserving unto themselves, if you like, the sole right of what should be printed and what shouldn't. So the Campaign for Press and Broadcasting Freedom is a really important organisation, joined now by Hacked Off, by Media Reform Coalition and so on. But it is the longest standing campaigning organisation, and so any donation that you can make will be great. But also, if you want to join the Campaign for Press and Broadcasting Freedom and be a part and parcel of all of these campaigns. Very quickly, because I've gone on a bit. The newspaper, the News International Dispute Archive, we set up the exhibition, which is on display in a minute. We've got a website. I don't know if any of you have seen the leaflet or got the details, www.wapping-dispute.org.uk. There's also the film Banging Out. But I'd like to draw your attention to, it's gone now, unfortunately. There are two books that have been written by people who were sacked by Murdoch. The one that's being held up at the minute, thank you, is written by John Trow. He's nearly 90 now, and he was here earlier on where he's had to go. You can get a copy of this if you email me through the website, give the website details. You can buy that for £10. I think there's a couple of copies left there. Two left on the, so that's £10. And then in addition, there's the Banging Out film. So any donations that you can make, any reminiscences that you want to put forward on the website will be absolutely great. And if you have any contribution about the Wapping Dispute, then don't hesitate to get in touch with us. But we need your cash, we need your money. I think there's collecting boxes at the back if anybody would like to contribute. And finally, the Morning Star supplement is available, and also a booklet of Tony Hall cartoons. Tony was one of the sacked workers. He's dead now, unfortunately, but he was a gifted cartoonist, but also he would produce a stack of leaflets, posters for the labour movement, and many of his cartoons and posters are still doing the rounds in the trade union movement. It's a lovely little booklet, which you're also welcome to have. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anne.